Hey, before we get started here, I just want to let you know that as a little thanks for listening, my company's offering listeners to this podcast some free software. So if you want to learn more about that, we have some more details at the end after the interview. Alternatively, track me down on LinkedIn and I'll have a pinned post at the top of my profile. Just search for Joe Meadows and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get started. Hi there, this is Joe Meadows and welcome to Safety Leaders Now, the show where we cut through the noise and identify the strategies and tactics that today's top safety leaders use to keep their teams safe. On this week's episode of Safety Leaders Now, Heather MacDougall joins me. Heather leads workplace safety at Amazon, where she oversees all 8,000 of their health and safety professionals, overseeing the safety of their workforce of over 1.5 million people. This was a special one for us. I was really excited to talk to Heather, and the more that I spoke to them and understood the way that they're approaching some of these problems, the more inspired I was. I really felt like we just scratched the surface here, but it's clear to me that a lot of the things that Amazon is doing, given all the constraints and challenges that they work within, are really going to redefine the way that all of us think about health and safety in the future. She gets into a little bit on her journey, how they're enforcing safety by design in their global operations, and overall, just really, really cool to hear about. Immensely complex operation. Heather has over 800 senior managers who report into her. You can only imagine the level of complexity she's dealing with, and it was just really, really cool to hear all the things she was able to speak to. So with that, I hope you enjoy it. I know I certainly did. Really, really hoping we can have Heather back on to dig a little deeper into some of the stuff we were only able to scratch. And with that, let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about your current role, where you are, and what you do?
Yes, thanks, Joe. I am the VP, Workplace Health and Safety at Amazon. And in my role, I have the privilege of overseeing more than 8,000 health and safety professionals around the globe. We have 1.5 million employees at Amazon, and our employees are in fulfillment, transportation, delivery operations, and then this also includes our Whole Foods markets and other grocery and physical store operations. So in my job, we work hard every day to keep people safe and provide them an environment that makes them proud to work at Amazon. So I know that we have work to do, but safety is a constant journey, and I'm really proud to be on Amazon's journey. So I think part of that personal journey for me is how we amplify the voices of safety professionals on our team, across Amazon, and then externally across the profession as well, and in sharing our story. So thank you for inviting me here today to do that.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm really excited to dig into that. I think Amazon is such a fascinating sort of case study in the occupational health and safety space. So I'm dying to dive into that. But maybe before we do that, as I was perusing your LinkedIn earlier today, I understand that your journey as a professional broadly started in the law space. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How did you your sort of legal history and how you transitioned into safety from there?
Yeah, so I did start out as a lawyer, not as a health and safety professional. I had 20 years in a legal career doing labor, employment, and health and safety before I went to the Review Commission. So those 20 years in the legal field led me to my appointment at the Review Commission. And I was there for 5 years, and then that role took me to Amazon.
Very cool. And can you just, this may be exceedingly obvious to you, but for me, that transition from law into the Review Commission is somewhat non-intuitive from my side. Like, can you just paint the picture? Like, how did that happen? How do you go from the law office into the review space?
Yeah, I think because in part I moved to Washington, D.C., and I began this chapter of my career where I was at a trade association with Fortune 500 member companies and senior HR executives. So in that role, I began to write what are called amicus curiae briefs. So those are friend of the court briefs, and typically they're on significant labor and employment law cases, such as the courts of appeal or the Supreme Court. So I think that work got me some recognition in DC. including by the White House during the George W. Bush presidency. So then long story short, that took me to a role focusing on safety, first as the chief counsel at the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, to which I would later return to a role as a commissioner and then as the chairman. So the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission is an independent federal agency that reviews citations and penalties resulting from workplace inspections. So it was really an unexpected call, but I think it just came from hopefully doing good work and then leading to some recognition for it. So I think a similar thing could be said in my journey to Amazon. Oftentimes that next great opportunity comes to you, not because you are seeking it, but because, somebody seeks you out and recognition for the work that you've done in a role that you love. And for me, the most pivotal roles have come to me that way.
Okay. Well, moving in as chief counsel, that to me, that's instructive. That makes the transition a little less strange, but again, that's super interesting. And I guess speaks to the value of the counsel you were providing, that you ended up in the role that you were. So that's super neat. I don't want to spend too much time there because I think there's too much great stuff to dig into with your role in Amazon, but thank you for providing some background. Awesome. So you do that. You transition into the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. Now you're at Amazon. I want to make a bit of a left turn here and hopefully get a little perspective on your kind of day to day, because as soon as I found out we were going to talk, I was endlessly curious around, with your role and the responsibilities associated with it, combined with the complexity of Amazon. I can only imagine how complicated your days must get. So can you give me a little bit of a look at what does a kind of standard day look like for yourself? Or if there is no standard day, what do the archetypes look like? And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Yeah, I think it might help to start talking about what the safety org chart looks like, because I think that'll help provide some of that. I mean, I report to Amazon CEO Worldwide Consumer, and then 10 directors report to me. So 4 of my directors are in the field, and they lead what we call this workplace health and safety team for different business units, customer fulfillment in North America, and then separately for EU and the rest of the world. And then I have a leader who leads what we call Amazon Transportation Services, and another that leads Global Delivery Services. So part of the work is focusing on in the field, leading those business units. And then we also have 6 central teams. And those central teams include our medical director who leads our health team. There's a governance team, which includes things like standards, assessments, inspections, audits, our OHS management system. Another team that's human factors and ergonomics, which includes our Working Well program, and ergonomist. And there's another team that's called design, construction, engineering. That also includes maintenance and contractors. And then we have another team that's our insights and innovation. So that's like the projects, tech, and BI. And then lastly, there's a human systems integration team, which includes our EHS information management system, as well as safety communication specialist, engagement programs, insights, capability buildings. So there's a total of about 30 directors within the WHS organization. And I think we're up to about 800 of the next level, which would be senior managers, things like project managers, senior risk managers, regional safety managers. And then each site has their own sort of structure in terms of site safety managers, site safety specialists. We also have on-site medical representatives and injury prevention specialists, in addition to all kinds of other specialists like ergonomist, business intelligence analyst, software developers, engineers, industrial hygienist, and more. So, I am leading all of those folks in addition to working really closely with our business leaders and working with finance, HR, legal. With a company of our size, we're also interacting with PR and public policies, and then specialized teams that include robotics and worldwide design engineering. So everything that goes into designing and launching our buildings as well. So I think that might tell you a little bit about sort of the role. It's never dull. Every day is different, but it's really exciting. And I think it's really great to be part of the senior leadership where you really are at the table at these senior business meetings. And I think safety needs to be woven into all of that. So it's not just about the safety organization, but how you impact the rest of the company as well. And one thing I would say to small and medium-sized companies is look at where safety is in your organization. Not every company has the same resources, and in smaller companies, I recognize that safety may not even be the only hat that somebody wears, but I think it really should have that equal footing with the operational leaders, including HR and finance and legal. I think where safety sits says a lot about the culture of the company and, whether safety is really that top priority.
For sure. I am blown away by the level of as somebody who has a leadership role, albeit not for 8,000 professionals, I have so many questions just based on what you just shared with me. I don't even know where to begin. Can you just give me a little bit of insight? This has nothing to do with safety, but more of just your role as a leader. How do you maintain connections with those kind of 30 directors who all fall within your organization? How do you stay connected with those people just on a logistical level? How do you find the time?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you have to kind of step back and think about in terms of safety and the scale and size of Amazon's operation is like, how do you achieve all of that at this scale and size? And so I think that there are a number of things that are really important to help anyone really within Amazon navigate that, and that's especially when you're talking about safety. So one of the things that I would say is you really have to look at mechanisms. What are the mechanisms that you have in place that allow for that kind of communication? When you have 1.5 million employees, you have to build these scalable solutions and programs. So I think that's things like standard work, mechanisms to track, to measure and inspect, and communication engagement. That really has to occur at all levels. And then optimizing decision making is critical. And that's one thing that I think Amazon is really good at. And one of the reasons it's been so successful and grown as quickly as it has is that ability to make decisions. And there's some mechanisms and some ways that I think Amazon is really good at doing that. And it can be just how we engage in strategic planning, through our processes, what we call our OP process, our 3-year process, and then on a more regular cadence, whether it's QBRs, the monthly business reviews, the weekly business reviews, and the white paper culture that exists at Amazon. So often decisions are made by reviewing a white paper. So what that means is typically a 6-page narrative, and you go in and you read the document. The first part of the meeting is typically you start with reading the document, and then it opens up to discussion. And people are can be very critical of those documents, but it's a great way to sort of focus on the quality of the narrative, rather than the PowerPoint for culture that some companies have. And it really leads to great decision making and looking at things as, is this a 2-way door decision that you can spend less time talking about because you can recognize that you can change it? Or is it a 1-way door decision? You really need to focus on making the right decision at that moment. So I think that's a really great part of the culture. And again, you just have to look at all kinds of ways of using technology and mechanisms to make sure that you are having the best sort of decision making that is helpful for an organization of our size.
Oh, yeah. That's, in a way, that's almost encouraging to hear, because again, in my limited experience, I know one of the things that we've really tried to push for with an increasingly distributed team, and the way the world's gone in the last few years, is focusing more on written communication. And I think people often think, oh, it's going to take me so long to write that. But with all the time we waste in meetings, being forced to articulate your thoughts and be specific with your language and clearly present whatever it is you're trying to do often takes less time than the meeting that would simply result in you having to write that afterwards. So
Yeah, I find at Amazon that the focus on writing and good writing is really critical to the way that we make decisions. And I think sometimes I drive my team a little bit crazy because I love writing, and I love good writing, and I think that it's really important in the work that we do.
Do you think that your legal training and the sort of specificity of language required to operate effectively in that space makes you a challenging editor for your team?
Yeah, I'm sure my team could answer better than me on that. But yeah, I think so. I mean, if you think about the work that I did when I was at the Review Commission and writing decisions on cases, there's a lot of editing that goes on before a draft becomes a published decision, and lots of eyes are on it. And so I think I bring that same kind of critique and review to looking at our white papers and our writing within Amazon.
How many white papers would you typically kind of be presented with in a given month or week? Or I have no
Oh,
idea the scale at which these things are coming across your desk.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really more a question of the day or the week.
Okay.
It's most days, I would say, at
Wow.
least one, if not more. Yeah, and they're typically, if you have like a 6-page white paper, it may be set up for a 2-hour meeting where about 30, 40 minutes of that is going to be reading, and then the remainder will be discussing.
Okay. I might steal some of this. Okay. With that in mind, I mean, I just had a bit of a question bubble up here. And I guess when I think about that volume of white papers being submitted and all these great ideas that are being presented to you by the 800 senior managers that fall under your purview, can you help me understand? And if you're not comfortable answering this, that's all right. But given the kind of global impact of Amazon, um, from where you sit, is there meaningful variation regionally in the way that health and safety is administered, just based on different sort of regional constraints or things like that, or are there overall threads? And I guess the reason that I'm asking is, with that volume of white papers, I assume that speaks to some degree of people wanting to make sure that the way that they're approaching health and safety fits the challenges of their given business unit, wherever they happen to be. Is that variation something that's or that happens, or do you try to keep things consistent globally?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always going to be variation, and we're not going to get everything right everywhere. And I think that's part of the recognition that needs to occur. And with our size and scale, how do you minimize that? So again, it goes back to things like setting that review cadence and keeping true to the strategy that has been laid out for that year, for that 3-year cycle. And goal setting, I think, is also really important. Before each year begins, we start working on our goals, and there's different levels of goals. There are some that are tracked by what's called the S team, and those may be tracked weekly, monthly. We have this other team that's called the WHS Senior Strategy Group. So that's some of the most senior leaders within Amazon that really come together each month, and they talk about safety. And we review our goals. We talk about projects. We talk about next steps. We make decisions. Um, and then I think, again, it goes back to this decision making and this ownership. How do you raise the bar? I mean, how do you execute on things, and then how do you manage all of your people and all your programs? And is something scrappy, which there may be some variances, because those are things that are perhaps ideas that come from a site, and they want to pilot something, they want to test something out, they want to be innovative. I mean, that's another thing about Amazon, is there's lots of inventors. So there may be people who come up with some really great ideas that start out as a scrappy solution at a site, but then as they show success, they are rolled up, deployed more broadly, and the solution becomes less scrappy. It becomes like something more sustainable and deployable across our entire network. Um, and then I think, it's about tracking performance. And so again, like looking at all of those things that allow you to inspect, to audit, to see that you're using the data that you get in a really meaningful way, making sure that assigned actions are closed out on, making sure that the things that we want people to do are actually being done throughout the network. So one of the things that we do in terms of communication within our own team is we have a weekly network action alert. So we try and bundle it so that it goes out once a week. It's a consolidated communication unless there's something really urgent that can't wait for that day of the week that it goes out. But I think that's another way, is just kind of looking at the forms of communication and making sure that it's meaningful and not too much just like clogging up your inbox. And so that you're going to get that action alert each day of the week that it comes out, and that there's going to be assigned actions that then go back to our EHS management system and make sure that you've closed out that particular action. So we know, like, we have dashboards for everything at Amazon. So on a particular action, we'll have a dashboard that says what site hasn't completed that action. We'll have the due dates, we'll know when somebody's read and they haven't completed it, and then we'll be able to go after them to make sure they close that item out. But then I also think it's about accountability, at all levels, because in safety, we are all owners. And so we really have to make sure that we're establishing those mechanisms within our leadership to establish and then integrate those metrics into evaluating safety leadership behaviors at the individual manager level. So, this is evaluated through what is a fairly structured safety accountability framework, and we're looking at improving that in 22 and taking it to a much more refined system where we can direct leaders to specific skills and knowledge that are really required for them to improve their safety performance. And then we'll also use it to look at role transfers and promotions. So, if we have somebody who isn't meeting the bar, we can provide them with the tools to improve their safety performance.
You've given me so much fodder here. I don't even know where to begin. So let's talk a little bit about that kind of accountability leadership behaviors that you're talking about here. One of the things that prompted us to create this show was, for me, coming from a role where I had workplace health and safety responsibilities, and now transitioning into a space where, working at a venture-backed startup and seeing the ways that people focus on driving performance in those areas. Really, I think for me, coming from a place that had more or less sophisticated metrics, it's given me huge appreciation for good sort of quantitative metrics and how powerful they can be as long as you're thoughtful and nuanced in the way that you implement them. So I'm dying to talk a little bit more about that. But in this specific case of measuring those kind of leadership behaviors, can you just give me some examples of what might be included on that scorecard, just for my own curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's going to be the key performance indicators that probably everybody company looks at. So it's going to be lagging metrics, whether it's RIR, lost time, our own version of a serious incident metric. And then it's also going to be looking at things like, have they implemented our EHS system, the standards, the assessments, the audits, that kind of thing. And I can get into a little bit, like, we've got our own kind of engagement leading metrics. And so those are part of it as well. And two of them are SLI, which is our safety leadership index, and connection. So SLI has two components. It's a metric, again, that we've created ourselves to gauge leadership sentiment, and another one that measures the associate sentiment. So there are a series of questions that are asked daily. There's a set of the same questions, but they rotate throughout the month, and you're asked typically 2 questions each day. And they're questions like, do you feel you work in a safe workplace? Do you feel that you have everything you need to perform your work safely? Do you feel encouraged to report safety issues? So those are a few of kind of the stack of questions. And we created this in 2018, and we use it to really track leaders and also sites to see how they're doing on a real-time basis in terms of how do the people who work at that site feel about safety at their site, and the leaders at that site. And we then track the leaders and help them in terms of providing them a mentorship program that would pair like a top performing area manager, for example, with those that might need more coaching. And then we have something that's not safety specific, but just again, like talking about how people feel about their experience at Amazon, that's called connections. And safety is sometimes a part of that as well. And everybody gets asked those questions. So when I log on to my computer each day, I will be asked those connections questions, and they're uniform across all of worldwide operations. Everybody's getting the same questions each day to solicit even more feedback from employees. And that, in a more kind of old school level at our sites, we have what we call voice of the associate board. So anybody can go up. Some of them are like the whiteboards, really old school, and others are electronic. But whatever the case, if the person identifies themselves, there will always be a closed loop to it. So we'll put the response, if it's something that needs to be investigated, that response will be put up there on that VOA board. And if the associate names him or herself, then the manager will actually go and close it out with that individual. But those are just a few of the ways that we're constantly trying to look at, getting that engagement, getting that feedback, so that we can gauge just the sentiment that's going on across our leadership, across our sites at a given day.
And how do you, again, if I'm an associate in a facility, is it through those boards that I'd be engaging with the connection system, or do they have a mobile app or tactical?
Yeah, so most of the time, and depending on what process path you're in, you'll have a handheld scanner, you'll have a screen, and so those questions will come up there and prompt you to answer before you can log in and start your work.
That's so cool that I guess just understanding that represents a certain degree of investment on Amazon's part to make sure that that's an integrated part of the software of everything down to a handheld scanner is super cool. Okay. Well, and you get bonus points here, because one of the things that I was so curious about is, given the diversity and the scale of your workforce, how do you measure any sort of engagement? So that system, that's global. That's not just North America. That's everywhere.
Right.
Wow. That's pretty nice. So based on the feedback that you're getting through those systems, are there any things that you're looking at on a leadership level around the way that, when you receive that data, how you respond to it? If you do see something that's concerning as it relates to sort of a flag around leadership, is it just that coaching, or is there anything else that you try to develop a more nuanced perspective of what you're looking at to make the right call as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned a couple of them already. So we try and provide coaching to the leaders to help them improve, and that's a very formal program within. I've got people who lead those programs to help leaders improve, to help them get what we see as better SLI results, and those SLI results are talked about at the most senior levels of Amazon. They are things that we are looking at, across the business units and setting goals for ourselves in terms of improvement. And so we have to drive that all the way down to each individual leader in order to meet those goals and to see that kind of improvement. So to do that, we've got pretty formal plans in place to help those sites, to help those leaders improve if we are seeing that, for 3 months they've been below the bar. So we'll provide them with a site that's performing well to help them get that coach to learn like what might work, especially if you can really dive down into particular questions. Like, I think that's the most meaningful. It's not just, overall you're at a 4 versus some other site that's a 4.5 out of 5. Like, what question is leading people to evaluate you below the bar, and then to really give them those tools to recognize or to see like what can help you improve in that area, whether it's their work area isn't neat and tidy, or they don't feel like they can report a safety concern.
I think that's so smart. I mean, focusing on that kind of qualitative assessment of the results of safety leadership in the field as a way to measure something that's in many ways tricky to track is just so cool.
There's another one that I'm really excited about. Our newest engagement tool is called Dragonfly, and it's a global safety observation program. And we are just we've piloted, and now we're developing really the technology to allow us to go to all BUs and geographies. It's similar to other observation programs out there, but it will be very tech enabled. So it'll empower associates to engage and participate in raising safety suggestions and concerns. So it will be through what is called our A to Z app. So it's an app that all employees have, and by connecting it into A to Z, we're then also able to connect it directly with our EHS management system that we call Austin. And we can get lots of great insights into what the concerns are that are being raised. We will then get to a point that we can use a bot to look on, all the data that we can get from that to help engage managers on particular issues if we see these trends with the observations that are entered through Dragonfly. And then I think it has a lot of other great uses as well. It's like a reward and recognition program as well, to give people recognition for the great ideas or suggestions that they put into Dragonfly.
Well, that is there any particular insight that you're looking forward to getting at a larger scale when Dragonfly is implemented more broadly? Is there any specific trend that you're curious to learn more about with that additional collection tool?
I think the ones that we saw during the pilot were the more traditional things that you would think of in terms of slips, trips, falls, that kind of thing, good housekeeping. Those are always really helpful. I think sometimes you see innovative solutions about like how to deal with tables, workstation setup, scanners, that kind of thing. But it really crosses a lot of different topics, and it's going to be different depending on whether you're in a warehouse or you're in a grocery operation. The settings can be very different, and the issues that employees face can be unique as well.
Gotcha. Okay, super neat. You've hit on all the topics I love to talk about, and I'm overwhelmed with where I want to go here. Well, if we're talking about observations now, I mean, this is a topic that I talk about fairly often. And so I'm curious, within the structure of Dragonfly, as you guys have developed it, what I talk a lot about in observations is that companies typically face three problems. The first is that they don't receive the quantity of observations they want. And I think in many ways you can solve that by incentivizing people to submit them. But then you immediately deal with a quality problem where as soon as you incentivize submission, all your data is not the most valuable. So then you have to solve that quality problem. Is there anything neat that you're excited about as it relates to kind of solving those problems? Because just based on everything you've said so far, I feel like there's time and energy has gone into making sure that this is going to give you all the information that you want, and ideally very little white noise.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent some time trying to find that right balance, which can be difficult, right? Because you want to get these observations entered, but you don't want them to be so high, because we are going to require on the back end that, again, every suggestion, every observation has to be closed out with the associate. So you don't want to have so many of them that you have your manager saying, oh no, here's another thing, this is going to take up all of my time. You want it to really be valuable. So I think part of that is around the the education, the communication that goes into showing people the value of the program and what's the right thing to enter and maybe what's not. Like if you pick up a scrap of wood or a piece of plastic on the floor, I'm not saying don't do that, but you may not need to pick up a Kindle, pick up your phone, enter it into the Dragonfly through A to Z for that. Like some of them are just go do it, and not like I need to tell my manager that I did it.
Gotcha. Okay, that's super. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know for us, we've looked at a lot of things around creating kind of almost like upvoting systems where managers can upvote the observations that they want to see more of, and it creates kind of a recursive incentive for the employees. And we've also played around a little bit with kind of waterfalling the impact of an observation. So if an observation leads to an investigation or an action, that we create incentives for the employees to understand that what they've submitted creates an impact. Anyway,
I like that.
Yeah,
I might steal it. But yeah, I mean, I think looking at things like gamification and just how you really make it fun to be part of owning safety and the solutions.
and understanding that it's about effectiveness and not just you submitted 50 observations that did nothing.
Right.
That's wasting everyone's time, respectfully. Okay, so we've touched on observations, so we're covered there. But I want to come back to maybe metrics more broadly. So you've talked about KPIs. Clearly, as you said, you have dashboards for absolutely everything. Given the complexity of the organization that you oversee and that you lead, what I'm very curious about, I have absolute confidence that you track everything. So asking you what you track is not a meaningful question. But what I'm interested in is, for you as the leader, and you don't have bandwidth for everything. Can you just give me a little insight into what are you checking into? And do you have a North Star that you want to make sure you're on top of all the time? And then kind of what's your cadence around checking in with those dashboards? Understanding that I'm sure you have a great leadership team who's really taking care of that on a day-to-day, but for you, and as you try to drive things forward, what are those metrics that you're looking at within that panacea available to you?
So, I mean, I think it goes back to the goals that we set. Those are the things that I am going to track most frequently. Mm-hmm. And we have those goals that we call the S-team goals. So they go up to that, small group of senior leaders and what they're tracking on a regular basis. And then we have a larger set of goals that are tracked by this senior strategy group. So those are the goals that I'm looking at regularly. And some of them are lagging indicators, and some of them are leading indicators like our SLI program. And I think that, as we build out Dragonfly, that will be one that's added to that. But it's also, just looking at things like on-time completion, the ratio of observations to near miss incidents, training effectiveness. We are doing a lot around improving, growing our capability system, and then action plan effectiveness. So whether, again, that's the SLI action plan or looking at, what we would call one of our poor performing sites, whether it's RIR or some other lagging metric, like we have action plans around those as well. Like, how do we help those sites become one of the better performing sites?
I'm just, again, containing my enthusiasm here. I'm very curious, and again, you may not have any specific examples here, but around those leading indicators that you are tracking, is there anything that you think Amazon is doing uniquely, or any kind of, given your ability to collect information about your sites, is that SLI kind of that key leading indicator that you think is a differentiator for your team, or is there anything else that you think other people could potentially mirror as a way to not just let incidents be the guiding force in their health and safety organizations?
I think SLI is the thing that's really unique, that is something Amazon is doing that I haven't seen anywhere else.
Okay. You're already there. Okay. Okay. I want to maybe just take a pause. I want to transition into talking a little bit about sort of the broad innovation spectrum, because I really think you have an amazing front row seat to, say, innovation in health and safety. But before we dive into that, as to kind of wrap up your leadership and where things are, I'm just curious, is there anything specific that COVID and all the exciting things that people dealt with associated with that taught you about leadership? Is there any kind of specific lessons there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would say is that as EHS professionals, we all have something to be proud of for what we've done through a pandemic. We've all worked super hard, kept people safe, and it's really been a time that health and safety has been truly the top priority for everyone across every industry. So I would just kind of take a moment to thank everyone who's in this profession for what they've done. But I would say, in terms of my experience, I think that the work that I did as the head of a federal agency, and then also the head of this team at Amazon, I think you learn a lot about leadership and just how things like trust are really important, and that can boil down to competence and ethics, and trust is even harder. It's even harder to achieve when there's uncertainty, and there was a lot of that especially during the early days of the pandemic, where the guidance, what we knew about COVID was shifting and changing. So in that type of situation where there is uncertainty, you have to tell people what you're doing and communicate about what you do know. And there may be things that you have to acknowledge that you don't. So I think this is true for your own teams as well as, at Amazon, where we have an external audience. These are things that are important for us to communicate both internally and externally, because people should know, whether they're my partners, our team, our customers, our employees, or stakeholders, they should know how Amazon is responding to this situation and get updated regularly. So in my actions, I try to be mindful of those needs that my team may have and others may have as well. And I think, again, the work that I did at the Review Commission and the work that I've done during this pandemic has really kind of helped me manage an organization and work across multiple teams that go beyond safety. And that was really the case during this pandemic. Early on, we were getting together every day, if not, twice a day, with HR, with legal, ops integration, IT, robotics, tech teams. Everybody came to the table wanting to help and to help identify solutions. So we had folks like the robotics team come up with something called the distance assistant. So it was using a computer screen, television monitor, and a camera um, with some tech that I couldn't really understand, but it would have you walk by a camera, say coming out of the cafeteria where you're going to have more of that tendency to walk up to somebody and to forget about social distancing. And the camera would show a green circle around you if you maintain that 6 feet, and it would get yellow and then red as you got less than 6 feet. So wasn't something that I had come up with or anyone on my team, but we just had in these daily conversations, folks thinking like, well, how can my team help out? And so I think that's one thing that this pandemic taught me is just how, there's deepened relationships, and I think that those will continue to serve us well even beyond the pandemic.
For sure, and I think that just maybe that those broad tenets of fundamental crisis management. I think a lot of EHS leaders were thrown into that fire pretty quickly as a crisis occurred that put EHS at the forefront. So I think it's pretty unequivocal that Amazon did a pretty amazing job there. So kudos to you for anyway leading that effort. So you talked, just to transition a little bit, and I know we're coming up on our time here, and I want to be mindful of that because I know you have no shortage of things on your plate. You talked about the technologies that your team developed to aid in social distancing in response to the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like with your role at Amazon, given the size of the organization, and to me, being the only tech giant with such a presence in what I would refer to as the physical world, I think that you have this amazing front row seat to that interface of technology and workplace health and safety. So with that said, is there anything right now that you're particularly excited about, or anything you can forecast as it relates to the way technology is going to change the way that people make work safe?
Well, I can highlight some of the things that we're working on right now.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I do in my roles, I always think about how we can synthesize our great team that we have and of health and safety expertise, and then kind of combine that with Amazon's tech capability and this, relentless innovation it has to solve issues. So like, how do you apply that to safety? Starting, of course, with Amazon first, but then sometimes even going more broadly. So I can give you one example where we did that, where we went more broadly. So in terms of our pit, like our forklifts, we looked at the technology that existed and thought, it hasn't really changed much. And how do we bring sort of this autonomous vehicle type of technology that you might have in a vacuum or a car to a forklift? So we paired with 5 of our OEMs and challenged them and worked with them to develop something. So we landed on something we call CAT, collision avoidance technology. And it pairs LiDAR with real-time location tracking systems. And it really helps us do those kind of things that you can do with a vacuum in a car with PIT. And we are using it within our own operations first. It's really an industry-wide solution to integrate, these semi-automatic controls that will reduce driver errors and many of the human factors that lead to some of these serious incidents. And then it'll make its way out into the marketplace once we're done, having it developed with these OEMs and applying it to our own operations. So that's one example. I think the other thing I would say is we look at how we can use RFID technology in some of our operations. And sometimes they're pretty specific, but I think you can think about how you can use them in your own operations as well. It's not just limited to what we do, but at Amazon, we've started using it in our grocery operations. So if you think about some of our freezers, these are very large freezers, and we have 44 grocery fulfillment sites in North America that have these large walk-in freezers. And each week, employees at these sites log, thousands of hours in minus 15-degree temperatures. And they range in size from, 5,000 feet to 100,000 square feet. And we want to make sure that employees aren't spending beyond our threshold of time in them. So we, in addition to, just thinking about PPE and job rotations, we've paired those with this RFID technology. So we call it sensor safe, and it manages job rotation, and it also verifies PPE compliance. So it makes sure that the employee, as he walks into the freezer has on the right PPE. So there'll be a chip embedded in the PPE as well as the entry to the freezer, and then also tracks how long they spend in the freezer. So once they hit that threshold, there's an alert that's given to the employee as well as their manager. And then once they exceed that threshold, there's another alert. So we can make sure that people are not spending too much time in these freezers. And then we've also used that same technology for things like deli slicers. So it pairs the slicer with the glove, and the slicer will only operate if the employee is wearing the right glove. And then it also makes the employee rescan with a set frequency, so they don't just sort of like try and game the system. A few years back, we developed similar technology with our robotics vest. So many of our fulfillment centers have robotics technology that bring pods to the employee who is either picking or stowing the product. So the employee is not walking great distances to the pod. The pod comes right to them. System tells you how to pick or where to pick or scan. But these pods, there's hundreds of them out on, again, a very large floor, and they are gated, protected from employees. But there are times where we need somebody to go out there and either pick up product that's fallen on the floor or to maintain the drives. And so we need a way for them to do that safely. So we created these robotic devices, or these vests, and an associate will wear the vest and use a Kindle, and it will lock out the area where they're going to go out on the floor. So they have to have the vest on. The pods know that the associate is wearing the vest, and the pods will, even as they get a certain distance away, the pods will start to go elsewhere. They'll move away from the employee. And if they need to, if they get to a certain distance that we've said is can't go any closer than that, the pod will stop. So it's really cool to see how these the robotic vest and all these pods kind of work together, out on the floor.
It's cool to hear about, let alone see.
And then I think, again, like just how we use camera systems, integrating it into our vehicles, our delivery vehicles, and we've seen really great results on some of the behaviors with using that technology in our vehicles, and just material handling within our sites, like looking at how we use autonomous vehicles to really help with moving totes around in our buildings. We've got 4 that have Jim Henson character names. I think they are Scooter, Elmo, gosh, I'm forgetting all of them right now, but they are named after Jim Henson characters.
Well, that's pretty sweet. I mean, if you're going to name that after something, that's a nice, wholesome, yet playful. Awesome. Well, I think that's, I mean, This has been I feel like I'm on like chapter 1 of this conversation. I think this has been so neat to just hear about everything that you guys are doing. And, in a way, I feel like in the same way that I feel like half of them are urban myths, but they talk about all these things that NASA created to go to space that we now use in our everyday life. I feel like you guys are maybe the NASA of workplace health and safety, that you're doing all these things that everyone's going to be doing in 10 years. It's pretty cool.
Well, it's exciting to be a part of. I really think as a health and safety professional, I can't imagine a better place to be because there really is this commitment. We have these new leadership principles. Jeff Bezos in his last shareholder letter talked about how he wants us to be Earth's safest place to work. And then we came out with new leadership principles in July that are around becoming Earth's best place to work, and size and scale bring responsibility. So there really is this commitment at all levels to prioritize safety and to use our technology, our innovation, our expertise to improve on our safety journey. And I don't think we'll stop until we succeed.
Well, based on everything you've said, I would certainly support that. I think that you guys are showing no signs of stopping anytime soon. Okay, well, I guess with that, I want to again make sure that we're wrapping things up and we're being respectful of your schedule. I wish I could talk to you for 10 more hours and really get into the nitty gritty on all this stuff, but unfortunately, we'll have to save that for another one. With that, again, Heather, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to get out there, either to speak to your team or speak to a broader audience about any message you want to share before we wrap things up?
Again, I would just thank the incredible team that I work with. And for those that are listening, if they want to learn more, we came out with our first ever safety report recently. It's called Delivered with Care. And there's lots of great details in there about our programs and our results. So if people want to learn more, they can go to our website and grab a copy of that.
That's a great plug. Awesome. Well, thank you, Heather. This was great. It was great to meet you and learn a little bit about what your amazing team is doing. Yeah, it was awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
That's it. All right. Well, thank you for making it all the way through the episode. I just wanted to mention again, this podcast is brought to you by OpsLock. OpsLock is the new way to keep your team safe at work. We're basically the most modern and advanced health and safety tool out there. If that sounds interesting to you, one of the things that we're offering to listeners of this podcast is free access to our workplace observations tool, meaning that you can roll out a digital workplace observations tool in your company, no matter what the size is, for free. If that sounds interesting or you just want to learn a little bit more, go to our website, opslock.com, fill out the Get a Demo form, let us know that you heard about us on the podcast, and someone, probably me, will set up a call with you. So anyway, that's it. Thanks a lot for listening through the episode, and I hope you have a great day.